Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diane Sanchez, Policy and Planning Analyst with the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency. I'll be assisting with facilitation today. I'd like to thank you for joining us this afternoon for this public meeting of the Citizen Advisory Committee. I hope you're all safe and well. NCORR, along with state and federal partners, continues to monitor impacts of storm damage and flooding experienced in our coastal communities this week. As with all major storms, we are also keeping lines of communication open with our general contractors and Rebuild NC homeowners who may have experienced damage or have questions about storm impacts. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Your line was muted upon entry. For committee members only, please unmute your line should you wish to participate during committee business. During the public comment period, attendees who wish to speak should raise their hand in WebEx. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to share their comments. You can also submit written comments through the WebEx chat, and they will be read during the meeting. We kindly ask everyone to follow the guidelines to maintain a respectful and smooth discussion regarding mitigation efforts. Helping us moderate the chat today is Jessica Southwell, Deputy Chief Recovery Officer. The slide deck, meeting minutes, and agenda have been shared for your reference. This meeting is being recorded and will be made available. If you have any questions about your application with the Homeowner Recovery Program, please feel free to contact us at 1-888-ASK-RBNC. or reach out to your case manager directly for assistance. Now, I'd like to hand over the meeting to our Deputy Chair, Mayor Pro Tem Owen Thomas, who will begin the formal portion and guide us through today's agenda.
Thank you, Diane. It is a pleasure to be here, pleasure to serve on this much needed committee. I want to first by making some remarks for some context regarding our committee. The Citizen Advisory Committee is a 14-member committee established by NCORR and the State Disaster Recovery Task Force to increase transparency in the use of CDBG-MIT funds, obtain public comment and input on proposed mitigation activities, and serve as an ongoing public forum to inform CDBG-MIT projects and programs. Committee members include representatives from areas of North Carolina defined by HUD as most impacted and distressed by Hurricane Matthew and/or Florence, as well as representatives with relevant technical and industry experience. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem of Lumberton, and I can tell you firsthand that we have experienced the Hurricane Matthew and Florence. So as you see in your agenda, I'll just go over quickly what our plans for today are. Welcome and introductions, 15 minutes, committee business, 15 minutes, NCORR updates, 20 minutes, follow-up discussion, 20 minutes, public comment, 15 minutes, and adjournment for 5 minutes. Adjournment won't take 5 minutes, I promise you. So from here, we'll go into attendance and do a roll call of the committee. Dontario Hardy, chair. I think he's on. I got myself. I'm here. Jimmy Tate. Is Jimmy Tate on from Pender County? Geraldine Merritt from Duplin County. She here? Keith Graham from Bladen County.
Present.
Okay, that's 1, 2. We got Charles Wright from Wayne County.
He is joining momentarily.
Okay. We got Kelly Shin from Carteret County.
Present.
We got Mary Perkins Williams, Commissioner, Edgecombe County. We got William Rowe, member from Brunswick County. Brad Lovin, Columbus County. I think I see him there.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
Sir. Kitty Hardison from Craven County. Larissa Witt from Cumberland County.
Present.
Okay, and Lisa Williams from Burke T County. So it doesn't sound like we have quorum.
Oh, I'm
Here
sorry.
we-
This is Lisa. I couldn't get my off mute.
Oh, you're good, Lisa.
Present.
So
And
one,
I'm
two,
actually Beaufort County, not Bertie.
you're Beaufort.
Yes.
Oh, you're
sir.
Beaufort.
Yes,
Okay.
Beaufort County.
Beaufort. Okay. We'll have to get that corrected. I'm sorry. Is that 7, or is that sounded like more like
Like,
5 or 6?
yep, I think we have 6 so far. If Charles Wright is able to join us in just a second, one of our team members was helping him to get connected to the WebEx. We should have quorum if he's able to join.
Okay, so we will we'll come back to that. So we'll move on to confirmation of positions and expiring terms. Members whose terms expired in May 2024 have received a renewal letters extending their terms to 2026. Ontario Hardy, Owen Thomas, Charles Wright, Geraldine Merritt, Keith Graham, Kelly Shin, Lisa Williams, Mary Perkins Williams. Am I saying Shin right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right. Committee member Latasha McNair has requested resignation from the committee as she is moving to a new role. This request was made effective 9/11/2024, which was the date of her request. We will now have 13 committee members moving forward. The governing rules require a minimum of 11 voting members. In May of 2025, excuse me, the terms of the remaining 5 members will expire. Please keep us informed as that date approaches about your interest in renewing your term. As of May 2025, Brad Lovin, Jimmy Tate, Kitty Hardison, Larissa Witt, and William Rowe. Okay. So we have proposed dates for our next meeting, which will be in the spring of 2025. We have May 2nd, 9th, 16th, and 30th. Obviously, I'm sure a poll will go out to see what meeting better serves us all. Are we looking at virtual? Do we want to meet in person? It would be nice to meet in person, in my opinion, but there again, it kind of just depends. Well, obviously we could do a hybrid option with some virtual, some in person. What does the committee think on that? Anyone have any thoughts?
Oh, and this is Brad Lovin. I'm good either way.
So I think the most realistic option to be sure that we have our quorum is going to be the hybrid option. So a lot of these committees coming out of COVID state committees have yet to meet in person, and it's kind of like you're sitting on these committees, you don't even know who's on the committee with you hardly. So it'd be nice to get in person if you can. But we'll follow up on that and get a poll out and maybe do the poll on the option of how to move forward with virtual versus in-person versus hybrid and see what the committee thinks as a whole. So I don't want to make the decision for us. So we'll move on from that. Do we have our quorum yet, Diane?
Still waiting on Mr. Wright to join us.
Okay. So from here, we'll move forward. Introduction to the NCORR team and transition to the NCORR updates. So the agenda. The NCORR updates will be led by Dr. Jeff Royal. Is it Royale or Royal?
It is Royal. Only in
Okay,
France,
Royal.
when I'm in a McDonald's, would it be Royale?
Sounds good, Doc. I appreciate it. He's the Director of Production and Mitigation. Tracy Colores. Did I say that properly? Colores?
That's right.
Is she on?
She's on,
Sorry,
and that's
I
correct.
thumbs up you. Yes, that's right. Thank you.
Good. Community Development Director. And they'll cover the action plan review, status reports on program activities, and reflections from the previous CAC meeting held in May. Diane, if you don't mind keeping me updated, if there's a good time to jump in and do that approval of the minutes when we do have quorum. It may make sense just to, well, it's whenever's makes sense to you between speakers. So from there, we'll go ahead and turn it over to the team for updates. Thank you so much. Unless anyone has any questions for me. Okay. All righty, team.
Dan, you want me to pop up the slideshow now?
Yes, please.
Got it. Become
Thank
presenter.
you.
And this is WebEx, so forgive me if this goes sideways. All right, slideshow. All right, all visible, all good?
Looks great.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you all for your time today. And I just wanted to, first of all, extend a thank you from Matt Arlen. He could not make it today. He desperately wanted to be here. He enjoys these very much. He enjoys connecting with everyone, and wanted me to convey that to you. And I will be standing in for him for some of his normal portions that he would be presenting. So we will have to bear with hearing me quite a bit during this presentation. One of the first things I am trying to figure out is how to advance the slides. Found it, little hidden WebEx button down here. All right, we'll begin with the action plan review. And as we are following up from our last meeting, you know that we were engaged in an amendment of the strategic action plan for CDBG mitigation. As we had related before, it's a large amount of money. It's over just over $202 million. You can see in these two different grants. I thought one thing to help with this would be to define exactly what mitigation is, according to HUD. And I'll read this because I have not memorized it. Activities that increase resilience to disasters and reduce or eliminate the long-term risk of life, injury, damage to, and loss of property, and suffering and hardship by lessening the impact of future disasters. There's also a focus on repetitive loss of property and critical infrastructure. So you can see from that, mitigation is something that is defined loosely in some ways, and it gives a lot of room for flexibility because the nature of the disasters are often different and varied. I know from this week, one of the first things we think of is rising water, naturally. And that's one of the ones that not only has a more significant impact, a widespread impact, it's one of the more common impacts we have. But of course, there are others. There's, we have the fires. We've had pandemics. There's even slight earthquake damage we've had in North Carolina. So there are other forms of disasters that we certainly will undergo. And this ability for these funds to mitigate those disasters is by design. It's part of the design element we have through HUD. Now, looking at what we've produced as far as developing programs to address the mitigation for future impacts. You can see there's a whole variety of different programs here. One of the things to think of is the programs are varied and they may not seem related in that sense, but they are. Not only have we defined, as you can see, we define mitigation openly to a varied array of disasters, but also you have to look at it from both a direct and indirect standpoint. We all easily think of a direct mitigation activity as something as raising a home, expanding a culvert, getting your HVAC unit up. Those are very basic things that are straightforward. But you also have, when you're looking at mitigating against future impacts, especially against the suffering, is looking at the community as a whole. The planning for that disaster, being able to have the right codes on the books in order to allow local governments to act and to not only prevent what they can, but to respond to what they cannot prevent. We also have different communities that are more vulnerable than others during and after disasters that also need to be serviced. And sometimes it may not seem a direct way, but providing things like permanent housing, ownership of housing can greatly benefit these communities. One thing that is not flexible, though, is who we serve. And you'll see here at least 50% of that funding must go to low, moderate income, 50% to most impacted and distressed counties. Now, since our last meeting, we shared then the amendment with you. We rapidly went into a public comment period, 30 days, that was wrapped up. We submitted it to HUD, and as you can see by the timeline, HUD promptly got back to us and approved this on July 1st. Now we were on the back end of this, where we're implementation and follow-up on it, which is part of what this meeting is. Here are the specifics. I'm not going to go through specific dollar amounts and percentages. You'll have access to this chart if you have the presentation. You can make that available, of course. I know we have. But with a couple of key things to point out in reference to that flexibility, to that idea that the disasters can be varied, the nature of multiple disasters can occur, and how we have to address those. You can see that the number of programs through here and how that is distributed in the nature of those programs and how costly they are. You can see nearly a third of the money is in the strategic buyout program. That is a very direct way, and we'll talk about that more later, of how we would go at mitigating for certain disasters, but it can be costly. We have the infrastructure recovery program. We've done some infrastructure on this. As we know, FEMA has a large hand in infrastructure, and that's one that serves wider aspects of the community. But you'll also see things like homeowner assistance, and Tracy's going to give us a lot of good detail on some of these other programs that get into that kind of idea of how ownership and home ownership will help, and in the progress we've made in those areas. But also note here, like code enforcement, compliance support program, maybe 2% of the budget, but $5 million, and that goes a long way for local communities to help. The other thing I like to point out in this is those percentages again. LMI, mid-counties, 50%. You can see we're running significantly over that and who we're serving as citizens in North Carolina. Now, the general idea moving forward. Well, we're toward the tail end of our programs. The current programs that we have, as far as the large ones of homeowner recovery, which we're trying to close out, as you can see, one of the grants by the end of the year. Buyout is in midstream, I would say. And some of the others have various aspects to them where they're getting either toward their end, or we've brought in a lot of those individuals or communities who we're going to help already, and that's a set number. Now, what will we do with future amendments? Well, most of that will be, as you could easily understand, is a business or your household. If you've got funds allocated to different areas, you may have to need flexibility to move these when needed to serve everybody. And that's the end goal. With the multiple programs you saw, we've got individuals and communities in those programs, and we want to get them to the finish line. So any adjustments we make moving forward will more be in the realm of these idea of how we're using the expenditure of the funds we still have, and not so much program redesign. It's just not a time for that at this point. How we moving forward with these funds. This week brings that up to the forefront. A future disaster. Well, we don't have the funds allocated for the future disaster before a disaster occurs. We all know that's just the way this works. And if a major disaster were to occur, of course, we would need to have that allocation in place to be able to have the expenditures associated with that disaster. However, MIT funds are flexible, and we do anticipate that if there are individuals who have subsequent impacts, and we ongoingly do this, that we're able to service them, we're able to provide funds permitting, and I always like to make that clear, the ability to help them. They may have subsequent damage, there may be an additional issue that arises, et cetera, for how we need to address them. So we're hoping that those flexible funds and mitigation will allow us to do that. And how that relates to one of the larger programs in buyout, we've developed a set of zones initially for the two major incidents, particularly Matthew. And then we've been servicing that population, and we're coming into a very high risk potential hurricane season. The decision was made because of that uncertainty to put a pause on any new development of buyout zones while we assess how this season continues. And let's see what happens at the end, so we have that data so we can make an adjustment if needed. Excuse me. And to that strategic buyout program, a very brief overview. You have some of this last time. For those who didn't see it, this will be good. But this is how some the money for mitigating in one of the more direct ways in one of the larger programs within NCORR. And you can see this is it's a voluntary program. Straightforward in a lot of ways. We have people, the picture's an extreme example, but this happens. You live in areas, and this is a problem that's been going on for 5,000 years, living near areas that flood. And for 4,500 or 4,800 of those years, it made sense to. There were reasons that you would weigh that risk against living in areas that flood. Now it becomes much more difficult to service from a private standpoint, both insurance, the local government abilities, et cetera, to protect against these dangers, because the properties are so expensive now. It becomes much more of a financial burden. There's also obvious risk to life and limb in these areas. So a very direct way is to have a purchase of the property. It's deed restricted, owned by the local government, back to green space, and we move the person out directly, remove them from flood danger. To do that, of course, we need to know how much on one end to pay them for the property. A third-party appraisal. They are allowed to appeal this. We will settle on something that's extremely fair. One of the advantages we have is looking at the current value, which helps reflect market conditions at the time. And then the other prong of this, one of the barriers that the population that we're serving, as you can see, nearly 3/4 of our population for low to moderate income have obstacles, barriers in the private financial markets. It's not always easy to go just because you've sold a home that may either not have a lot of inherent value in it, or due to a mortgage, you may not clear a lot, and then go back into the home market. So we've developed some incentives that will help these people transition. It's fine to sell a home, but you still have to live somewhere. So on the back end of this, we have these in place, as you can see, from both full incentives to help with the purchase, to down payments, or if you have a rental option that you'd like to take, even though we encourage purchasing a home, of course, we do have an incentive there to assist. Also, understanding how we want to keep citizens in the counties from which they already reside. You can see we have an incentive there that's weighted towards staying in the county. And I know that that's a key aspect, and it's also something that they can take advantage of to help them in that transition. Where are we operating? Well, it's no surprise. Edgecombe, Robinson, Wayne, Columbus have the bulk of these right now. There's a great overlap between the buyout program and the other myriad of programs at NCORR. Where the impacts are, you tend to have, you look at a heat map for all of them, there is quite a bit of correlation there of where people are impacted and where they are needing assistance, and where we are within the program in these different areas. I will warn you on this. The buyout program is not exactly designed in a formalistic step program that sometimes this kind of graph would indicate. There are certain items you have to do before you do others, obviously, and a lot of them are being done simultaneously and or have been completed. I can tell you, if you were to look at a lot of the items listed here, plus the ones that aren't, we just saw appraisals and, looking at title searches, all these other things, we're hovering around 90% of those being completed. The applications are just in different areas of where they happen to be for environmental or trying to get an award or trying to get a meeting together to set up, set up the title transfer, et cetera, et cetera. And this mitigation, what does it look like? What does it look like on a practical level when you do a buyout? Well, the obvious one, we're removing a home from a high risk or repetitive flooded property. That makes a lot of sense. We can see that. But on the flip side, you're returning that piece of land, and hopefully with other pieces of land, and we keep aggregating these so that the floodplain goes back to its normal function of operating as a floodplain to protect other homes and other areas of cities and towns and communities who are along this river basin. We coordinate municipalities in some cases if they need easement for the infrastructure that would come in to also help with easing flooding conditions or other conditions that can be addressed through infrastructure. And of course, going back to green space, there is something positive in that. Everyone who's had a chance to have greenways in their communities, that is a good thing. And not only does it, as we said in point 2, to help the floodplain areas go back to their normal function, but it also gives a new function for citizens to be able to enjoy some outdoors without having to venture too far. Now, I will turn this portion of the presentation over to my esteemed colleague, Tracy, who will give you some more of these great projects we have here at NCORR. I'll be flipping the slides for Tracy, so she'll have to give me a little cue every now and then.
Thanks, Jeff. We're going to pause 1 minute for Diane to give us a quorum announcement, right, Diane?
I don't have my drum roll machine.
Well, Diane said we now have a quorum, I believe.
There we go.
Is that
I'm
correct,
so
Diane?
I'm so sorry. I was on mute. Mayor Thomas, I believe that Mr. Wright has joined our call. Mr. Wright, are you here?
Actually,
Checking in for Charles Wright. I believe he may have joined us via phone. Mr. Wright? Okay, we can try again in a few minutes. Mayor Thomas, I'm sorry about that. Checking back in after the team has wrapped up the updates.
okay, sounds perfect.
Thank you.
And thank you. I appreciate the intro from Jeff. And it's a pleasure to be with you guys this afternoon for an update on how we are investing these mitigation grant dollars in programs to benefit the communities that were most affected by Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. I have provided slides that were distributed to the panel ahead of time. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on any of the information on any of the slides. I am going to run through them rather quickly in the interest of time, but of course, I'm open to any and all questions during the Q&A portion of this meeting, as well as any follow-up questions that members of the committee might have. Next slide, please. Last time we talked, I told you about the roughly 30 projects that we are providing funding for in the areas of vital infrastructure and new housing. And we are roughly a third of the way through expenditures on the infrastructure projects in this cohort. And most of the housing projects are a little behind that. Next slide, please. But I wanted to show you one example of how you don't have to have a multi-million-dollar investment to make a significant difference in a lot of the communities in Eastern North Carolina that are using these dollars. The generator on the right was the only way that the town of Parkton had for providing emergency wastewater treatment capacity in the event of a natural disaster. And as you see, it's a 1957 generator, and it had outlived its natural usefulness. And when it's also very close to the ground, and when the Matthew floodwaters came up, it took it out of commission almost immediately. The generator on the right was purchased with these mitigation dollars, and for a little over $100,000, we were able to not only give the town of Parkton a new emergency generator to cover their needs, we were able to elevate it so it's somewhat better protected against rising floodwaters, and we were able to install an automatic switch so that it no longer requires someone to travel into hazardous conditions to turn on the generator. It automatically will come on when the power goes out. Next slide, please. And we talked about the Magnolia Auditorium in Duplin County the last time I was here. This beautiful old building was in disrepair before Matthew took its roof off. And the resulting property was a public health hazard, as well as, run the risk of injuring people with falling debris. So the town had to close off access to its fields, its ball fields that were right around it. And they didn't have the money to demolish and clear the area because of the hazardous materials that had been used in the property's construction back in the World War II era. So for less than $100,000, we were able to come in and demolish and completely clear the debris, as well as remediate the hazardous materials that were on site. And now the softball league is able to start up again. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Can y'all hear me? Oh, there we are. Thank you. The Fayetteville Metro Public Housing Authority, when Matthew floodwaters and the subsequent mold made it impossible to use their, and okay, Jeff, it looks like you've gotten a little bit ahead of me. If you could back up one more.
Yeah, I think
yes.
there's a delay, Tracy, when I switched. So you kept saying next slide, so I ran ahead. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So, in the case of the Fayetteville Metro Public Housing Authority, we used a little over $600,000 of mitigation grant funding to repair their community center. And that means that over 642 residents, as well as those in the local surrounding community, once again, will have access to the after-school programs, the computer center, the job training, and the other resources that this vital resource was bringing to the community. Next slide, please. And I won't spend any time on any of these projects that we've updated you on, but I'm happy to go into more detail during the Q&A. Next slide, please. This program, as some of you on the panel I know are very familiar with this program, the Homeownership Assistance Program provides down payment funding and closing cost assistance for eligible first-time home buyers that are investing in properties in any of the 16 counties that were most impacted by Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. There are two types of assistance. If you are a first-time home buyer, you can get up to $20,000 towards your down payment. And if you're a first-time home buyer whose parents don't also already own a home, you can get up to $30,000. And then all eligible applicants can receive up to 5% of the sales price towards closing costs. And there's a $4.5 million budget for this program. Next slide, please. We relaunched this program August 19th and are happy to report that we have 71 closed transactions. We've spent half the money and helped with almost $2 million for down payment and another $400,000 for closing cost help. Of all the homeowners that we have helped, 51% identify as Black or African American. Almost 70% are either female households or female-headed households. And over half are that first generation home buyer that I talked about, where not only is this a first time buyer, but their parents don't own homes also. On our website, you'll find the story of Mr. Owen Clifton II, who we helped buy a house in Fayetteville in Cumberland County. And he has moved his disabled mother in with him. And the quote that we have from him on our website is, quote, "I'm just so grateful to have something that belongs to me." And we all understand what that means. And of course, we wanted to spotlight him because we are so happy that we've been able to help him get into a home. Next slide, please. This is a summary of all the program's beneficiaries to date. And I'll draw your attention to the averages on the right-hand side, where the average down payment is right in that middle zone of about $25,000. And you'll see the total down payment is only $31,000. So on average, we are providing about 80% of, or 80 or more of the total down payment that people are able to put down on the house, which means that we are lowering their borrowing costs, lowering their monthly payment, and helping them avoid expensive insurance. And the average loan amount for this program is about $161,000. Next slide, please. This map shows the geographic distribution of the homes that we have been able to fund purchases for so far in the program. The 12 counties listed are 75% of the counties that we have targeted with these funds, and we will be trying very hard to deploy these dollars in all of the most affected counties before we are expended. But as you see, the money is going very fast. And we all know that there's a great need for help in becoming homeowners for those that aren't already able to own a home. And we're glad that we're able to use this program to do that. The pie chart on the right shows the how folks have self-identified and racial identity and mortgage process. And we wanted you guys to be able to see that as well. Next slide, please. The pages that follow this appendix page have been presented to you before, and that's why I stuck them in the appendix, because they are pages that you saw the last time we were together, and I just included them here for reference because it's a list of all the projects we are funding in community development with these mitigation dollars. Looking forward to questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. Jeff, could we hold the presentation here for just a moment and send it back over one moment to Mayor Thomas? I believe we have quorum now. Mayor Hardy's on the call, and I believe Charles Wright is as well. Mayor Hardy,
Yes,
are you here? Thank you.
absolutely. How's it going? Good to see you, Diane, and all those on the call. The entire team in NCORR. Good to see y'all. And thank you for the presenter.
Thank you. Back to you, Mayor Thomas.
All righty, so we will move forward with our approval of the previous meeting minutes. We'll look for a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
All right, we'll look for a second on that.
Chairman, this is Keith Graham, and I second the motion.
All righty, do we have any discussion? Me on this Zoom calls, you can assume yes and ask for no's. Say yes and all our names. How exactly do you guys operate? Sometimes I feel like different ways. Can we assume yes and hear for no's? You good with that, Diane?
I'm good with that. As long as you both are comfortable with that, we can move forward.
All right.
Yes.
Having a little bit of a hard time hearing.
We hear none. All righty, let's go ahead and move forward. Our presenters, Dr. Royal, Tracy, you guys are Brady. So down. Are we good to move forward, Dr. Royal? Or are you guys done?
Oh, we got
Tracy?
just the last part of the presentation here.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we'll go ahead and move forward whenever you're ready.
All right. Is the PowerPoint still up? I'm just making sure.
The reflections from the previous meeting.
That's it.
Okay.
Like a Barbra Streisand song. This looks back at some of the things we had spoke about in our last meeting and where we've come with this, and how we've internalized this and taking this in, as well as from other sources. And you can see how to improve access to recovery was a big theme. Reaching individuals where they are, coordinating with communities, and fostering partnerships. And we'll briefly go over some of that. And a lot of this really hits home with us. I know that for myself, this was illustrated very poignantly when I was on a key turnover. A key turnover is where we go after someone's got a new home, and it's a big event, and they come in to sign the documents, and it's the first time they really get to enter after everything's been set up. And obviously, this is an event with a lot of tears and a lot of hugging going on. It's a very emotional time. It's fantastic. But I was walking around with a couple that got their home. This is in Bladen County, and we wandered out eventually out on the front porch, and I was looking out, and I pointed down. I said, just down the road there, I see there was a mobile home that had been abandoned. Basically, you could tell it had been flooded, and I said, it's a shame, they didn't, enter into the program. And then I looked across, from where that porch was, and I looked at another one. There's another brand new one over there. I said, well, I have to walk over and see if your neighbor, if that's one of ours. He goes, oh, it's not. They replaced that on their own. And I said, that's why, you're here, and we're here. We had you as an applicant, yet we've got someone down the road that didn't, and one right next door that didn't, come and apply the program. And that's one thing we've learned about this is the difficulty and the challenge really of reaching down to that individual level within a community to understand where people are and if they just to hear about you, getting that message there, getting that information there that we're here and to apply. One of the great things about continuing as an organization is that that message will be echoing because we've put it out before and people have seen these homes go up. But it's something we're desperately keen to improve upon, particularly since our last discussions about directly going out in these disasters to the communities themselves and letting people know firsthand, face to face, that we're here to help service them. You can see some of the efforts that we've looked at based on our last meeting. How can the local efforts improve our recovery efforts? All that we went over a little bit of this on the budget part of it, augment local code enforcement offices, and now we've got $5 million to assist with that. Identify what each county does and does not need from the state. You don't want to go in assuming. And then look at how we can help assist document the losses. One of the issues is direct information. FEMA goes in early from most large disasters. They have a set of data, but they're looking at it from a different perspective. I've done some of those for FEMA. A lot of them are very macro, but sometimes we need the micro. We need to get in. I need to go see Mayor Hardy. I need to go sit down. We go to Kinston. We look at the streets and say, it's this street, and this street, but not these two. That got most impacted. That's the kind of granular information that would serve us all better. Engagement with the communities. As you move up on the scale of the government entity, you do by nature lose that ability to have that granular look. And that is exactly why we need to always work with the local governments, strengthen that. I can tell you is something I've seen before and after we took our programs into the state, that we have made great strides in this. I know some of you personally have been to the counties. We've met with individuals, and that is something that we understood that we needed to do. But after meetings like this, we understand even more how more important it is, how critical it is to continue those efforts. Looking at local collaboration, once we do make those connections and some of the planning beforehand. Well, I'm happy to report that we have been having lots of blue sky planning meetings. We talk about things we've discussed with you at the CAC meetings. We've had partners come in from emergency management. We've had people come from FEMA. We've had individuals that have come in giving their views from other agencies on how we can work together. And then we bring in a lot of what we've discussed with our local partners into these meetings to retool and rethink every aspect, every policy, every program, every method that we're going to do, planning for that next disaster, so we will not have some of the same issues that we saw, obviously, in a startup, if you will, for these other two. Only after you go through these can you learn these lessons. And this was NCORR's first going through a major disaster declarations like this. And I think we've learned a lot in these discussions that we're having, and these will be implemented. And then how can we look at the damage assessments? And what we've seen from this, if someone who has had to go down to the granular level of ascertaining if someone's home was damaged or not, trying to find a way to get a dime back for them, to looking at widespread damage and doing assessments over neighborhood areas. One of the things that's very helpful in this is that communication, both with the applicant and the local government entities who can communicate exactly where some of this damage was. One of the things we look at on one side are all the tools we can use. There's new things that are being developed by emergency management, Department of Transportation, where we can look at rain gauge history, map flooding areas, so we can say, okay, yeah, look at these areas were the ones that were greatly impacted, et cetera. But also where those gauges aren't and where people are, and trying to get that information and trying to ascertain that. It was very helpful in Bertie County, particularly working with individuals there to help get us that kind of information on neighborhoods, which we didn't have from any other source. And they were able to go through because they had documented a lot of the neighborhoods and damages that took place. So we're able to rely on that for our use in order to address and service more citizens from that county. So we are working on these. We continue to review. We continue to take on board all information we receive, and only hope to improve NCORR as we move forward. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeff and Tracy, both for your presentations this afternoon. Back over to you, Mayor Thomas.
With some folks.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think we're having
having
I think we're having just a little bit of technical difficulty. We'll be back in just a second. Are you back with us? Mayor Thomas, are you back with us? Okay, folks, give us just a second as we work through these technical challenges. I think if you turn off your camera, maybe you could join us just on audio. Stand by, folks, for just a second. Thank you. Okay, I think he has rejoined us. Are you back with us?
I am. Can you hear me now?
We hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, that was very weird. I'm not sure what happened there. So as I was saying that we're going to move forward with follow-up discussion with the committee, get feedback, reflections on mitigation efforts. This discussion can be as long or as short as you like. Anybody's free to chime in and give any feedback that you'd like. If there's not much of that, then we'll move forward to public comment.
Thank you so much. It looks like one of our committee members, Pastor Graham, has a comment he'd like to make.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first thing I'd like to say, it's so exciting to hear Dr. Royal and them talk about the advancement they've made by going to local communities out of the feedback that was given at last meeting. It's just so refreshing to see as changes are made, impacts are being done. And I also want to raise up, even from the last meeting, we talked about how important the government side is locally, but also how important it is for local organizations and local community leaders to be involved in the discussions to help alleviate some of the things Dr. Royal talked about. Not totally alleviate, but to help where one person knows about it and gets service, but the next door neighbors don't. One of the things we kind of talked about is how in where people in local communities who don't look at the government of getting a fair shake, or have been rejected from different programs, or hear bad information and don't feel that they will be successful, they won't step up and go and get the services because it's another government program. To where if you communicate with local organizations and local community leaders that are in the communities working with the people, they can help better translate and help better get the movement done to get people to the services. So I didn't hear you mention that piece, but I'm just so excited about the strides that you've made and being able to consider those additional pieces along the way.
Thank you so much, Pastor Graham. Mayor Thomas, there's an additional committee member, Lisa Williams. She'd like to also share her feedback.
Yes, I cover 5 counties: Beaufort, Pitt, Martin, T, and Hertford. And in those municipalities, we have some very large, we have Greenville, the city of Greenville, which is our largest city of those 5 counties. But for the most part, we are very small municipalities. I'll give you an example. We have a small municipality in Beaufort County, the town of Belhaven. Come to Belhaven today, you will find that the main thoroughfare street is closed. I live in close to Belhaven, because it's flooded. There are parts of Belhaven today that even though the houses have been raised, the residents have had to leave because there's a foot of water in their yards or more. The town of Belhaven is very on board with buyout. We had started what was going to be a very large rebuild project there, which is now on hold. But the problem is, while rebuild offers some incredible incentives to the property owners, and that's wonderful. But then these small municipalities are left with large swaths of land that they then have to mow and maintain. Now, out in the county, it's different. Out in the county, scattered site, buyout, it can grow back up, return to its natural state, and that's great. That's what's the purpose. But in municipalities, you can't have 6 lots between 2 houses that are just grown up. So you get pushback from the small municipalities that are completely on board with tearing these houses down and relocating these homeowners, except for, yes, you're taking some tax value away. It's not a lot. A lot of these houses don't have a lot of, they don't bring in a lot of revenue. They're not, because of the flooding situation, their value is pretty low. But nonetheless, there is some value there. So you're taking that away. And then they're incurring an additional expense of mowing these lots. For example, in the town of Belhaven, we were looking at possibly as many as 20 lots that the town was going to have to take on to mow. And they were willing to do that. Trying to figure out how they were going to pay for that, but they were willing to try to take on the challenge because they wanted to help mostly an elderly demographic for the most part, low income. So they were willing to try to take on that challenge of how they would maintain these lots. But I wish moving forward that there would be some consideration, especially for the small municipalities, of the cost of maintaining these properties. Because without their support, if you can't get buy-in from your town manager and your council, it's almost impossible. You have to have buy-in from them. And it's not that they don't want to have buy-in. It's just that they're looking at an extremely tight budget already. And when you add in 20 more lots they've got to mow, it can become quite an expense. So I wish there would be some thought into some kind of incentive, not only for the property owners, but for the municipalities themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mayor Thomas, I'm not seeing any other participants who have raised their hand, and no comments in chat so far from committee members. There is a comment in chat. I'm happy to read it for you if that's helpful, and we can also read that during the public comment period.
Yeah, if it's not a committee member, then we'll go ahead and move, and the committee doesn't have anything further, then we would move forward into public comment, and then we can go from there on that. Do we have any more feedback or reflection from the committee? All righty, we'll go ahead and move forward to the public comment regarding mitigation efforts. We'll take comments 3 minutes each, and then we'll review the written comments in the summarized chat. So Diane, do you want to help me kind of guide and direct if people have raised their hand and want to speak during the public comment period?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
course, let me pop over into chat to see the comments, and then we also have one raised hand from Brad Levin. Brad, I see.
We'll go with the raised hands first, and then we'll go to the written.
Thank you. Brad, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to get my hand raised there. The question I was just curious about from maybe Jeff or Tracy is about interaction with local government. When you have a victim that is in the system and their home is being replaced, has there been zoning issues that are difficult barriers to overcome when it comes to replacing that home? For example, a manufactured or modular home that's existing, that's been totally flooded or damaged and has to be replaced. I just hear from a lot of victims that say, my town will not allow me to replace that home because it's a manufactured or a modular home. And I was just curious, in some of my work, I hear that a lot. And so you have a participant in the program that can't comply because of the local zoning issues. And I didn't know if that was a systematic issue or just one-offs here and there, or if it was something that, I'm not even sure if this is the right forum for that, but I would raise that as a concern that could be problematic to victims of storms trying to deal with replacing their home. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Mayor Thomas, I'm not seeing any additional raised hands at the moment. There are several comments in chat that I'm happy to read.
Yes, please. That'd be great.
Wonderful, thank you. The first comment is in response to Lisa Williams' feedback, and it comes to us from Christopher Dreps, and the comment reads, Lisa, agree. There are ongoing stewardship monitoring needs. Make sure the deed restrictions are followed. No one is encroaching upon the land. Maintenance, things such as mowing, getting problem trees, or even making improvements. When NC Land and Water Fund gives grants for projects, they include 25 years of funding and contracts. There's an additional comment from Giovanni Simpson, and it reads, you stated that determining buyout zones is on hold. How long will that be? Hurricane season? Spring 2025? Seating of new officials next year after elections? Is that expansion in jeopardy? So far, those are the comments that have been shared in chat. And going back to the participant panel, I did see a raised hand. Christopher, go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to clarify my comment that what I was referring to in terms of long-term maintenance provided through the North Carolina Land and Water Fund, when they fund land protection projects or restoration, stream restoration kinds of projects, that comes from an endowment that has been set up, and it allows for long-term, like 25-year contracts that pay the recipient each year to go out, make sure the properties are in decent shape, report any issues that have arisen. It doesn't provide for actual operation and maintenance, which is some of the stuff Lisa was bringing up, but I just wonder if that's a model that could be considered for those kinds of things in lower income communities.
Thank you, Christopher. Mayor Thomas, not seeing any additional raised hands or comments in chat.
All righty. Well, at this time, let me see here. Now, do we want final call on, and we're not responding to any of the written, is that correct?
That's correct. We are accepting feedback and reflections, but not a response at this time.
Okay, that's what I thought. All righty, then, if there's nothing else from the committee, and or the public, then we will move forward to Diane for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much to our Deputy Chair and Mayor Pro Tem Owen Thomas for guiding us through the agenda today. We appreciate everyone's participation this afternoon. The recording and transcript of this meeting, along with the meeting materials, will be posted to our site, www.rebuild.nc.gov/CAC-meetings. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting in the spring. Back over to you, Mayor Thomas, to adjourn our meeting.
I appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to get on. I appreciate the committee for taking time out of your day to come on and reflect and listen and be here. We will hopefully have a hybrid option and be able to get in person in May. And if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you so much.